Creating speed with the lower body is the same as creating speed with the upper body. Swimmers need to create a lot of propulsion. They got to move a lot of water backwards, and they're going to do that by using as big a surface area as possible for as long as possible while accelerating through that range of motion. We're going to take a look at the details of how that happens. First up, we're going to talk about the leg kick recovery. The down kick is responsible for a lot of the propulsion, but it's the up kick that allows it to be effective. Let's check it out. Hi everyone, Andrew here, helping you help your swimmers get faster. It doesn't necessarily look like it, and it typically doesn't feel like it, but in flutter kicking, dolphin kicking, and underwater kicking, the recovery when the leg is moving back behind the body is actually completely straight. And if swimmers can't execute this skill well, it becomes very difficult to kick down effectively, which is what often propels swimmers down the pool. By getting a better understanding of what's actually happening during the leg kick recovery, we can get a better understanding of what we have to do in order to develop it, and the better we can develop it, the faster swimmers are going to go. So we'll start off with underwater kicking. It's the easiest to see, and what we'll watch here is just started the recovery, the legs are completely straight, and they only bend once the thigh actually starts coming back down for the down kick. So during the entire up kick right here, the legs are completely straight. And what that's allowing swimmers to do is they lift their feet, they lift their knees, they move through their hips, and then when they reverse it, they can snap down in succession. So by lifting everything together like that, they can snap everything down. And so it's a straight leg recovery when they're kicking underwater. And that's a really critical skill, because if the leg kick wasn't straight, swimmers wouldn't be able to snap it through like a whip, and that whipping action creates a lot of propulsion that helps swimmers drive down the pool. So we'll take a look at it again. You can see the legs are completely straight through the recovery, and they only start to bend once the thighs actually start moving down into the down kick. And so it's a straight leg recovery right there. That sets up the whipping action down. And it's, again, the straight aspect of the recovery. That's what's critical to set up the whipping action that's coming back down. Not only does that down kick create a lot of propulsion, but when swimmers lift the legs straight and then quickly reverse the direction of the thighs, that creates a whipping action at the top of the kick, and that can create some propulsion as well when the feet switch directions. So rather than bending the knees to recover the kick, it's absolutely critical that swimmers recover with straight legs, and that's going to help them create the most speed underwater. Next up is flutter kick, and we're going to see the same basic thing in action. It's a little bit tougher to see because the rotation's happening, but we'll be able to check it out. So if we catch it right there, he just kicked with his right leg, and he's going to recover it straight up. And then he's going to kick with his left leg there, and then the leg recovers straight up. So kicking down and then lifting straight, kicking down, lifting straight. You can see that one there, coming up straight, and then reversing directions. On the left leg there, kicked straight, and then lifting straight up, and then snapping back down. And so it's the same idea as the flutter kick. Again, right there, the leg kicks straight, lifts straight up, and then it happens again on the other side. And so it's critical that swimmers, just like with underwater kicking, they kick down, they lift the leg straight, and then they reverse it and snap it back down. That allows swimmers to recover the leg with less resistance, because if they pull the foot back, that's like putting on the brakes. And that whipping action, when they reverse it, they can snap the leg back down fast. And you can see these recoveries there, right there. Straight leg on the left leg, straight leg, straight leg, straight leg there. That's a really good angle here on this left kick right there. Lifting that straight up and then snapping through and reversing it. So again, if swimmers can learn how to kick, whipping through on the down kick, lifting straight up, and then snapping through and reversing that on the down kick, they're going to be able to create a lot more propulsion. They're not going to put on the brakes by bending the knees to recover the kick, and by reversing directions, they're going to be able to create a ton of propulsion with each kick. So we'll see the same thing here in backstroke. It's a little bit tougher to see as compared to the underwater kicking because of the rotation, but we should be able to pick it out. So if we watch right there, that left leg just recovered straight, and right there it recovers straight again. So we can take these couple frames here. So the swimmer recovers that leg straight there, kicks up, and then snaps it straight back down, kicks up, snaps it straight back down. And so you can see the legs are recovering straight. Then the swimmer reverses directions of the thigh. That snaps the foot forward like right there. And then again, the leg recovers straight down and then snaps back up. Straight down, and then snaps back up. And so that's the key aspect of the recovery. It needs to be straight like a whip so that swimmers can reverse that direction, create some propulsion, and then they also don't have to create much resistance when they recover the leg. And if swimmers were to bend the knee to recover the leg, that's like dropping the foot right down like an anchor, and that's just going to create a lot of resistance. It's going to be outside of their body line, and then they're not going to be able to snap the kick through either. And so it's all about recovering the leg straight right there. You saw another good one that was obvious, and that's going to allow them to recover the legs effectively and snap the kick up and create a lot of propulsion. And so with butterfly, we're going to see the same thing, the same dynamic, except both legs are going to be going at the same time. So if we watch right here, the legs recover straight there, and then once the thighs are moving down, that's when the knees break, recovery straight there. And because the body is at an incline, the recovery is going to be a lot smaller on this second kick, right basically to there, and then they start reversing and bending the knees. But even then, there was a straight leg recovery. It just wasn't very big. Right there, you can see big recovery, and that's straight, and then the thighs are moving forwards to kick, and that's where the leg starts to bend. And so the feet are not being recovered up. It's that the knee moves forwards, and that bends the kick. The foot is pretty much in the same spot here as it is here. It's that the thigh dropped, and that bent the knee as opposed to consciously pulling the foot up. So again, a straight leg recovery there. It's not as big because of the incline of the body. And then you've got a bigger straight leg recovery here, and then the snap through of the kick, which again is facilitated by lifting the legs. And if swimmers were bending the knees every time they just try to recover here, they're really going to struggle. That's going to create a lot more resistance in a stroke that's already creating a lot of resistance. So the more that swimmers can recover the legs straight and then snap through, like right there, and again, a much smaller recovery, a much tighter recovery because of the incline of the body. The feet aren't going to come up nearly as much. And then a much bigger recovery there, and a much bigger and more powerful snap through with the kick there. And so the more swimmers can learn how to recover the legs straight, the more effectively they're going to be at minimizing the amount of resistance that they create. And just as importantly, they're going to recover the legs with a lot less resistance, and that's going to allow them to swim a whole lot faster with a whole lot less effort. Kicking plays a huge role in how fast swimmers go. And while the whole leg, and in some cases the whole body, is involved in the kick, and just like the hands are critical for delivering force into the water with the upper body, ultimately it's the feet that do most of the force application when kicking. The more effectively swimmers can learn to use the feet well, the faster they're going to go. In underwater kicking, flutter kicking, and butterfly kicking, there's a wave of undulation that travels down the leg, and ultimately it ends at the foot, and the foot is what delivers all that force into the water. If the foot's not being used well, swimmers aren't going to get nearly as much propulsion out of each kick, and as a result, they're not going to swim as fast. Most coaches are aware that big floppy feet are really good for creating a lot of propulsion with the legs because it allows swimmers to get a big surface area and have that big surface area face backwards for a lot longer. As we'll talk about in this video, there's another important aspect of the kick. When done really well, the final snap of the ankles, the final flick of the toes can be a huge advantage for helping swimmers power themselves down the pool. Let's check it out. So let's take a look at this swimmer kicking underwater. So right now he's about midway through the kick. The tops of his feet are facing backwards so he can move water backwards. And as he comes through, he snaps down and those toes end up facing the bottom of the pool. The front of the foot is actually facing forwards. And it's that snap through at the end right there that creates that last bit of propulsion that can make a huge difference. So if swimmers can learn to kick effectively and then snap through at the last bit right there, you can see it quickly goes from facing backwards to down to forwards. That little snap can make a big difference and help swimmers create a lot more propulsion. And so swimmers need to maintain really loose, floppy ankles. And so all that really needs to happen is the wave travels down the foot, and then the leg snaps down, and then the foot follows from that. So the more that swimmers can create that little flick at the end, the more propulsion they're going to create. And it's mostly about having a nice wave-like action, whip-like action from the kick, and then allowing the ankle to be flexible and loose so that it kind of happens naturally. And you can kind of see it a little bit better here with the turbulence right there, really snapping through there. And again, that's going to create that last little bit of propulsion that adds up each and every kick cycle, and that's going to allow swimmers to go faster. So again, they have to have a whip-like action from the kick. They have to have loose, flexible ankles, and then that snap through is going to happen naturally. If they try to be really rigid, they try to be really tight, they're probably going to miss out on that. So we'll take a look at the same thing here in backstroke, and if you watch his back leg, his right leg, it's a little bit easier to see it happen. So that leg is kicking up here, the top of the foot right there is facing backwards, and then right there he's going to snap through, and the toes end up pointing towards the surface of the water, and the top of the foot, the front of the foot is actually facing forwards now. And so again, we'll watch it again here, and you'll see right there, you can see it on the left leg right there, snaps through, and then on the right leg, again, it's going to come up right there, and then again, there's another snap through right there. On the left, that's another one that's pretty clear. As you can see, boom, right there, the toes flick through, and again, that creates more propulsion. And then right there on the right side, same thing. And so again, it's that wave-like, that whip-like kicking action, flexible, loose ankles that aren't held rigidly, and that allows for the momentum of the leg to just let the whole foot snap through, and that's going to create more propulsion for swimmers, and that's going to help them go fast. Right there, that's another good one. And you can actually see the turbulence kind of coming with the foot right there, and then he flicks it off of it right there. You can see that, and again, that little extra action, it allows for swimmers to maintain a good surface area going backwards for longer, and then that flick through is a big difference maker in terms of creating a lot of propulsion. And so we talked about in a previous video with the straight leg recovery, and what we'll see is by recovering the leg straight, that allows for the foot to snap forwards, and then the leg right here, we'll see it here, gets pulled backwards, and that allows for the foot to continue snapping forwards while the leg returns backwards. If the leg was going to be recovered by just bending the knee, we wouldn't see that. So we'll take a look at it again here. There's the wave-like action, the foot snaps up right there, and then the straight leg recovery allows the foot to keep flicking forwards while the whole leg is pulled backwards. And if the knee was just being bent from that position, they were recovering the legs with a bent knee, you wouldn't see that action because the foot would be locked up and pulled back down immediately. So again, just like in underwater kicking, that toe flick is really important in backstroke. And since freestylers are flutter kicking just like in backstroke, we're going to see the same thing. And if we watch on that back leg, you can see the ankle snap here, the toes flick right there, and that's that a little bit more of propulsion. You can see it on the left side, and then really right there on the right side, you can see that kick really snaps through, and then the leg recovers straight, and the foot gets pulled out without disrupting that snap. And so that toe flick there, really important for creating more propulsion, helping swimmers get more out of it. It's just that final piece of the whipping action. The ankle snaps through, and that creates that flick of the toes, and that flick of the toes puts that much more force into the water, allows swimmers to create that much more propulsion. So the more swimmers can get that flicking action into their kick, the more propulsion they're going to be able to create with each and every kick, the faster they're going to move down the pool. Now, as we saw with underwater kicking, we have basically the same basic kicking action, and we'll see that same flick here. So if we watch this swimmer here, right there, we'll see the flick, and again, more aggressively right there, you see the flick too. And through most of the kick, the feet are facing backwards, and then boom, they snap through right at the end, and now they're facing forwards. And so it's that snapping action again that creates that much more propulsion, allows swimmers to create more speed, better maintain their body position, and that's going to get them down the pool faster, and that's ultimately what we're looking for. So it's one of those skills that can be subtle, but can make a big difference. And again, this isn't necessarily something swimmers need to consciously focus on more than anything else. They just have to keep relaxed ankles, they have to keep relaxed feet, and they need to be kicking in a whip-like manner. And if they can do that, that snap through that we see right there, that's going to happen naturally. The ankles are going to move through that range of motion that we're looking for, the toes are going to flick forward, and as a result, swimmers are going to go faster. In underwater kicking, flutter kicking, and butterfly kicking, the kick is a whip-like action that starts from the hip. Swimmers definitely don't only kick from the hip, but that's where the movement starts. And as a result, the thigh is what's going to be moving first, and that's what's going to dictate the overall movement of the kick. The more we can see what's happening with the thigh, the better we can understand what's happening with the kick and if there are potential issues that swimmers are demonstrating that may be preventing them from going fast. The kick is really important. It's critical for creating propulsion, it's critical for improving alignment, and it's a critical aspect of great timing. While it's important to have strong, fit legs, the skill of kicking is equally, if not more important, for helping swimmers go faster. Kicking isn't just about the feet, it isn't just about the knees, it isn't just about what happens at the hip. It's a full leg movement that needs to be timed really, really well so that range of motion and speed can travel down the leg, and that results in a really great snapping action that happens at the foot, and that's what creates propulsion. And that wave, that whip, it starts from the hip. The first part of the leg, the first bone that's going to move is the thigh. Let's take a look at how the movement of the thigh drives the kicking action so that you can better understand how to help your swimmers go fast. So we'll take a look first at a swimmer kicking underwater, and what we'll pay attention to is how the thighs are the first place that the swimmer moves. And so the leg is moving up together, and then right there, the thigh starts to move down, and that's what causes the knee to bend. The feet are actually going to continue moving up, and then the thigh keeps moving forwards, and then the shin starts moving, and then the foot starts moving. And once the kick is complete, the thighs start lifting back up, they get into place, and now they're starting to move forwards again, and that's driving the kick, and that's creating the propulsion that we're looking for. And so it's not just that how the feet are moving, it's how the thigh is moving that's driving the kick. And so if the thigh is relatively stable, it's not moving up quickly, it's not starting that kick and initiating the downward movement, swimmers are going to be in trouble. They're just going to be moving from the knees, or they're just going to be moving their feet around. In either case, they're not going to be creating nearly as much propulsion as if the movement is starting from the hip, the thighs get the kick moving, and that's where the rhythm is driven by. So just finish that kick here, the thighs moving up, the whole leg is going to move up, and then once that kick reverses right there, now the thigh is moving back down, then the shin moves, and then the ankle and the foot follow. So that's how the movement needs to happen. It needs to be driven by the movement that's coming from the hips. That's where it starts, and then everything else follows like a whip. And if we follow through to the butterfly stroke itself, the kick is just finished. The whole leg's going to lift up right there. Now the thigh is starting to drive forwards. Everything else follows. The thigh lifts the whole leg up. Thigh moves forwards, and then the whole kick follows. So it's the exact same timing, the exact same rhythm, the exact same movement as underwater kicking. The thigh is going to drive the show. The movement happens at the hip, the thigh bone moves, and that's what creates that wave of undulation. If it happens in a different sequence, swimmers are not going to be able to create nearly as much propulsion. So again, the thigh moves up, now it's reversing, thigh's moving down, kick happens. Thigh moves up, now it's reversing, moving down, and then the kick happens. Thigh moves up, snaps forward, and then the kick happens. So again, it's that wave. It starts at the hip, then the knee, then the ankle, travels down, moves faster as it goes, gets bigger as it goes, and then we get that snap through on the end that creates a lot of propulsion. The same thing is going to be happening here in backstroke, just like with dolphin and underwater kicking. It's a little bit tougher to see just because there's more rotation, so it's not quite a clean angle, but you can watch that thigh is moving up. Now it snaps back down, it's moving back up, and it snaps back down. And so if you watch slowly, the thigh just finished moving forwards on the left side. Now it's moving back, and that allows the foot to snap forward. So backstroke, it's inverted. The movement of the thigh up is what starts the kick, and then the movement of the thigh down is the recovery of the kick. And so again, though, it's the same thing. That thigh moves first. That bends the knee. That allows the shin to come forwards. That brings the ankle forwards, the foot snaps through. And then it recovers straight down, the whole leg is pulled down, and then the thigh drives forward, and that snaps the foot forward. So same movement, same idea, same exact thing, it just happened at one leg at a time, and now it's happening on the back. And of course, we've got this rotational element that makes it a little bit difficult to see it fully with each kick. And right here, the leg on the left just finished kicking down. the left thigh starts moving forwards, that bends the knee, and then the foot snaps through, and we've got ourselves some propulsion. So same idea, same concept as the dolphin kick and the underwater kick. Everything is being driven by the thigh, and that's helping swimmers power down the pool. And just like with backstroke, we'll see the same thing with flutter kick, except it's on the stomach. So the kick is going to happen here. The whole leg lifts up. Right there, the thigh drives forward, that bends the knee, and then the foot snaps through. Once the foot snaps through, the whole thigh lifts up. It reverses at the top, the thigh drives down. That brings the foot along for the ride, and we've got ourselves a snap through and some propulsion. So same exact thing as the dolphin kick, the underwater kick, and kicking on the back and flutter kick. We've got the same thing going on. The leg recovers straight up from the thigh reverses, starts slamming down, and that brings the foot along for the ride. So again, the thigh is driving the show. The movement starts at the hip joint, which moves the thigh bone, and now we've got the knee bent, and then we have the ankle snapping down. So it's that whipping action that's so important, and it's all driven by the timing of the kick. It starts up higher in the body, it travels down the body, and that wave gets bigger in amplitude, and the limb speed gets faster, and that allows swimmers to deliver a lot of force into the water, create a lot of propulsion. It's easy to conceptualize flutter kick, underwater kick, and dolphin kick as purely an up and down motion. However, there's a big rotational component to the kick as well, and that's often most easily seen in the ankle. If swimmers are only kicking straight up and down, they're going to be missing out on some critical kicking speed. As the legs are moving up and down, they're also going to be rotating in and out. While that motion may not be particularly obvious, and swimmers may not even be consciously aware of it, that doesn't mean it's not happening. And because it's a behavior that's consistently seen in effective kickers, it's something that makes a difference. While it may not be something to consciously focus on and consciously cue, it's still important to be aware of what's happening so that you have a better understanding of how swimmers are moving fast through the water. And if they're not being effective with their kicking, this can potentially be one of the contributing factors as to why. Let's check it out. This same motion is going to be happening while kicking underwater, while flutter kicking in freestyle, flutter kicking in backstroke, or dolphin kicking in butterfly. It's going to be easiest to see this skill when swimmers are kicking underwater because in freestyle and backstroke, there's a lot of rotation of the body, and that can make it harder to see this relatively subtle movement. And when swimmers are kicking on the surface, freestyle, backstroke, butterfly, they're always taking bubbles down with them. And again, that makes it difficult to see what's actually happening. So we'll check it out with underwater kicking in particular, but know that the same dynamic is happening in all of the other kicks. So if we watch here, what we're going to see is that the feet turn out and then they turn in. And the knees are going to go out and the knees are going to go in. And so you see as the kick comes down here, the feet are pointed in, the knees are in, the ankles are out a little bit, and then everything's going to snap down, and those feet rotate in, and they end up pointing straight down, and now the feet are facing straight forward. So again, there's a big rotation, and then that movement is going to reverse itself coming back up. So everything's going to start turning in during the down kick, and then as the kick goes through, the feet rotate back out, and now they're facing flat. And so it's that rotation through the down kick where towards the beginning of the kick, the feet rotate in, they stay in that position, and then the follow through of the kick right there, you can see those feet rotate out. And so this is a really, really clear image. You can see the feet, the position, and as they follow through, that's where you get that rotation outward through the kick. And then that movement's going to reverse itself, and then coming back down, it's going to reorient, and during that push, the rotation is going to follow through there, and then we're back to neutral. So again, it's not purely an up and down motion. There's a rotation to the kick itself. That's happening throughout the whole leg, and it's expressed most vividly, most visually through the feet. And so as the kick comes forward, that's when the rotation goes out towards the end of the kick. It sets back up, everything rotates in, it stays rotated in through the main portion of the down kick, and then rolls out as the feet follow through. So again, there needs to be this rotational component to the kick in order to create as much propulsion as possible. And importantly, this isn't just a theoretical idea. There is some research to show that the faster that the hip rotates in and out, which is again going to move down the body and show up in the ankles, the faster swimmers are able to kick underwater. So it's a rotational component to the kick that's also really important for generating speed. And if swimmers can't execute it, they're going to struggle. So we can watch another swimmer here and we'll see the same thing. As the feet are coming down, everything's rotated in, and then to follow through, things quickly rotate out. So setup of the kick, during the down kick, everything's rotating in, and then boom, everything rotates out at the end of it. So again, there needs to be a rotational component to the kick. It's not a purely up and down motion, and the more that that rotation component can be integrated and smoothly integrated into the up and down motion, the faster swimmers are going to be able to kick underwater. It may not be the most important aspect of the kick, but when swimmers are trying to go fast, every little bit matters. So in awareness of the rotational piece of it, something else to look for, another potential opportunity for improvement to be aware of, because again, if you're aware of it, you have the opportunity to help address it and help fix it. To help swimmers learn these skills, there are two key considerations. One, you need to make sure that they actually have the range of motion necessary in the hips to make it happen. If that's not there, nothing else really matters. And secondly, they have to be able to kick fluidly. If they're extremely rigid, if they're extremely stiff, those rotational components are just going to disappear. So helping swimmers and ensuring that they have the adequate range of motion and then learning to kick in a fluid manner are going to be really, really, really important for facilitating this skill. If those two things are in place and swimmers get a lot of exposure to a lot of great kicking opportunities and kicking exercises and kicking activities, things will tend to fall in place. And again, the same thing is happening in butterfly, freestyle, and backstroke. It's simply easier to see with underwater kicking. When it comes to breaststroke kicking, knee position absolutely matters. However, it's not about achieving a perfect, optimal, or a magical knee width. It's about following fundamental principles that need to be adapted to individual swimmers to help them create as much propulsion as possible. There's a lot of opinion about how wide swimmers' knees should be when they kick in breaststroke. However, when you look at elite breaststrokers, you tend to see a range of effective knee widths that seem to produce really, really fast swimmers across that spectrum. When you look at the commonalities between those swimmers, what you see is that they're always putting their knees in a position that allows them to create a lot of propulsion with the legs. In just about every single case, the knees are slightly wider than the hips and the feet are wider than the knees. That puts swimmers in position where they can create a big surface area with their whole foot and the bottom part of their shin, and they can create a lot of force in that position that moves water backwards. Because swimmers have different ranges of motion in the hips, the knees, the ankles, as well as different limb lengths, and of course, they have different amounts of strength, different swimmers are going to need to find a different knee position in order to create as much propulsion as possible. When you have a better understanding of what swimmers need to do to create propulsion, it's a lot easier to adapt that kick to different swimmers. Let's take a look at those fundamental principles and how the application of those principles is slightly different from swimmer to swimmer. Now, if we take a look at this swimmer here, what we're going to see is that the knees are wider than the hips. That's going to allow them to be in a good position to create a lot of force. And then the feet end up wider than the knees, and that's going to put them in a position to move a lot of water backward. If the feet aren't wider than the knees, it's very, very difficult to get the whole foot facing backwards and get part of that shin, the lower part of the shin, facing backwards too, and then moving straight back from that position. And so if you watch what happens with the knees, the most important thing is not so much the absolute width, it's the width relative to the hips and the feet. So as you can see in this swimmer, it's almost like a W where the feet are wide, the knees are in the middle, and then the hips are narrow. That's going to be the key position that swimmers get in. How wide they get can differ depending on their range of motion and their strength. However, the knees are going to be wider than the hips, if only slightly, and then the feet are going to need to be wider than the knees. And if we watched this swimmer here as well, what we'll see is another key aspect is that the knees, once they set up, once the kick starts, the knees do not slide out. They stay in that same position. The swimmer kicks back, and then once the kick is finished, the knees still haven't moved. It's once the kick is finished, that's when things come back together. That position is maintained throughout the kick. If the knees start sliding out, swimmers are going to lose their ability to maintain pressure on the water. They're going to lose the effectiveness of the kick. And sliding out isn't pushing water backwards, it's sliding around the water. So again, it's all about creating an effective position to move water backwards and to do so strongly within the limitation of the swimmer's anatomy. So the swimmer has to get the feet wider than the knees a little bit wider than the hips, and then from that position, they're going to kick straight back. The knee position is going to stay stable until the kick finishes, and then the knees are going to slide in. And so again, it might be narrower, it may be wider, but it's going to depend on the ability of the swimmer to get into those positions effectively. Some swimmers are going to have to be wider, some swimmers are going to have to be narrower, some swimmers are going to be in between. If a swimmer can't get into effective positions with a really narrow kick, they're not going to be effective at doing that. They have to be a little bit wider in order to get the feet set up and in order to execute a strong kick. So here we'll take a look at two different breaststrokers that have a slightly different kick. The swimmer on the left is going to have a little bit narrower kick, we can see right there, and then the swimmer on the right is going to have a little bit wider kick. But what we want to pay attention to is that in both cases, the setup of the kick, the knees are wider than the hips, we can see that on the right, and then the feet are wider than the knees. Again, we see that on the right, and the same thing on the left, the knees are wider than the hips, and the feet are wider than the knees. And then from that position, they kick straight back. So again, just like the previous swimmer, they're assuming the same basic positions. They're getting the feet wide, the knees wide of the hips, and then from there, they're kicking straight back. They're not letting the knees drift out during the kick, and they're being very direct with the kick. And so even though these swimmers are using a slightly different kick in terms of the range of motion and the position of the knees, the same basic principles are the same. We'll see the same thing with these swimmers here. If we watch the two swimmers in the foreground of the video, the swimmer on the left is going to have a little bit wider kick, and then the swimmer on the right is going to have a narrower kick. And this is a perfect snapshot of that. In both cases, we can see that the knees are wider than the hips and that the feet are wider than the knees, but the swimmer on the left has a wider kick than the swimmer on the right. But when they actually kick, knees stay in position and the feet move straight back. So again, same idea, same principles, same concepts, but a slightly different application based on the individual. Both cases, they're able to set up a kick that moves a lot of water backwards, and they're able to set up a kick that's very direct, but they're going to need to do that with a different strategy because they probably have differences in range of motion, they have differences in limb length, they have differences in strength. It's hard to know exactly what those differences are and the impact that they have, but we can see that they're choosing to apply those principles in a slightly different way, and that's going to result in a slightly different kick. But the concepts are the same. Feet wider than knees, knees wider than hips, kicking straight back, not letting the knees drift out. So the danger can be in trying to model a different swimmer if the swimmer that you're trying to help doesn't have the same physical characteristics as the model swimmer. They're simply not going to be able to get in positions as effectively. And while they'll still need to use the same principles, they're going to have to apply those principles in a slightly different way. So rather than trying to find the optimal kick width, it's understanding what needs to happen for an effective kick and then helping swimmers determine the effective positions that are going to help create the most propulsion for them. More than any other stroke, breaststroke creates a ton of drag. And a huge part of that is recovering the arms and recovering the legs. In this video, we're going to talk about how swimmers can recover the legs while minimizing the amount of drag that they create. And while they will create drag, it's about finding the most effective strategy to make that happen while minimizing the amount of resistance they create to maximize the amount of speed they create. When it comes to recovering the legs, breaststrokers are damned if they do, and they're damned if they don't. They have to get the feet up into a position where they can move water backwards, but in order to do so, they're going to have to create a lot of drag. They've got two basic options. One is they can try to really focus on bringing the heels to the butt and not letting the knees drop out of line, or they can bring the knees forward to set up an effective kick. While traditionally swimmers have been taught to not let the knees come forward in order to minimize the amount of resistance that they create, it's actually the strategy that allows swimmers to create less resistance, maintain more effective body alignment and body position, and execute a better kick. Let's check it out. So if we watch these swimmers here, what we'll notice is that the knees do drive forward pretty significantly, and they end up at not quite a 90-degree angle, but a pretty steep angle, which of course is going to create a lot of resistance on the thighs. And so while that's not a great position in terms of alignment, it is actually a better choice than trying to recover the heels to the butt without letting the knees drop. And so what we'll see, these are two Olympic champions here, and in both cases, they're bringing the knees pretty far forward in order to set up their kicks. You can see that position on the left, and we'll see it again here on the right. So why are they doing this? So if they try to bring the heels to the hips without the knees coming forward, here's what's going to happen. One, the feet are either going to come up out of the water, or swimmers are going to have to let their hips drop in order to keep the feet under the water. And so if you watch here, we watch this swimmer set up his kick, his hips aren't going to drop at all. But if his knees were to remain in that position, he wasn't going to bring his thighs forward. He'd have to lift his heels up out of the water. In order to keep the heels under the water, the hips would have to sink. And so if you notice here, his hips don't drop at all. And so he's able to keep his alignment really good in terms of his body. He's able to keep that right up at the surface. Yes, he does have to drop his knees out of alignment, but he doesn't have to drop his hips out of alignment. And so that's the trade-off swimmers are going to have to play with. The flip side of it too is that by recovering the heels to the hips as opposed to bringing the knees forward, it's going to be much more difficult to get into an effective kicking position. But if he lets the knees drive forward, he's able to get those feet in a really, really, really good position. So you've got two things going on. One, maybe it's a push in terms of creating drag with the front of the thighs as opposed to letting the hips drop. But by letting the thighs come forward, swimmers are able to get in a much better position to create more propulsion. So even if it's not an advantage from a resistance standpoint, which I think it is because you can see this swimmer here, she's able to keep her hips in alignment as well, but swimmers are able to get a better kick as well. So you've got kind of a win-win there in terms of letting the knees come forward. Yes, that will create more resistance than keeping the legs straight, but keeping the legs straight isn't an option, and swimmers are going to have to do something in order to get the feet recovered forwards so that they can kick backwards. So again, we watch this swimmer here. If she's in this position and she tries to bring her heels to her hips, the whole body is going to go down. And if you're not sure that that's the case, have swimmers kick on their back, breaststroke, have them not let their knees come forward at all. Make sure that they're recovering everything under the water, and you'll notice they start to arch. Their hips are going to press up, and if they were on their stomach, they would press down. And so that's what's going to happen if swimmers don't let the knees come forward. Now, of course, this is a resistive position. It's not a good position to be in, but it's a necessary position. So how can we minimize the impact of that? So if we watch this swimmer here, she's going to pull, she's going to wait to kick. She hasn't started kicking at all yet. She's still got her legs in alignment. They're still in streamline. And then really fast, one or two frames here so we can count it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then she's kicking. So 4 frames, is not much time at all. And so she's getting into that position really quickly, and she's getting out of that position really quickly. So you can't necessarily minimize the amount of resistance that's created, but you can minimize the time that is spent in that position. So rather than just trying to bring the heels to the hips without letting the knees drop, it can be more effective to bring the knees forward a little bit or let them drop down out of alignment, because one, it'll allow swimmers to maintain their body position, their hip position, but 2, it's going to set them up for an effective kick, and then 3, in that position, they can make it happen really fast, and they can get out of that position really fast. So watch her alignment here. Really, really good with the lower body. Really, really good with the lower body. Bam, she gets out of it, and then she's right back into that alignment, and she's going to hold that through the next arm pull. So minimizing the amount of time spent in those positions, maximizing the propulsion, and then minimizing the loss of hip position is all going to be really important for helping breaststrokers create more speed. So we'll take one more look at it from a side view. And so what we'll see, again, watch, she's going to keep her legs really aligned for as long as possible. Then she's going to drive those knees forward. She's not going to lose her hip position, stays right up at the surface, and then bam, she gets out of that position fast. So it's okay for swimmers to let their knees drop down, and for some, they may have to almost exaggerate that to make that happen because it's going to allow the hips to stay in position. It's going to allow swimmers to get into a really effective position to kick backwards with, and then all they have to do is make sure that that kick, the recovery of the kick, so right here is lightning fast, and then the kick itself is happening fast too, so that they can get back into alignment as fast as possible. So again, rather than trying to let the heels come up to the hips, it's more about driving the knees forward, letting them drop down out of alignment so that the heels can come up quickly without compromising the position of the hips. So if swimmers want to set up their kick effectively in a way that minimizes the resistance they create, maximizes the propulsion they can create, they want to let the knees drop down out of alignment. Some of them may need to think about actually bringing them forward. That's going to allow them to set up a really effective, really propulsive kick, do so without losing alignment of the hips, and then all they have to do is be really, really fast with the kick, and that's going to prevent them from creating a ton of resistance. They'll be able to create as little resistance as possible, which means creating as much speed as possible.